I'm Elisa Parker. We're broadcasting here from the Wild and Scenic Film Festival, Nevada City, California, and Grass Valley, California. Wild and Scenic Film Fest is one of the largest environmental film fests of its kind in the United States. Over the weekend, thousands of social change activists and filmmakers to tell their stories come together in our little town. You might have heard about a year ago, it was right around the time of Standing Rock, that several everyday extraordinary action heroes took it upon themselves to turn off the valves at the tar sands, right? Which is a huge resource for our oil, and they took it upon themselves to say enough's enough. It is an honor to have them all here with us, including Steve, who is the filmmaker of the film Valve Turners. And first, welcome to Wild and Scenic, everybody. It's great to have you here. Steve, we had Steve on briefly last night, and speaking to his own civil disobedience and documenting this. I'm going to have everyone first just introduce themselves and let me know where you came from. And Steve, we'll start with you.
Yeah, my name is Steve Lipte. I made this short film. I was documenting Annette and Emily in Minnesota, and I'm coming from Brooklyn, New York.
Michael Foster from Seattle, Washington.
Emily Johnston, also from Seattle, Washington.
Lenard Higgins, Portland, Oregon.
And Annette Kaplin, Seattle.
Okay, so first let's just, for folks who aren't familiar with the story, let's just give a synopsis of what happened, and then we'll get into your own personal motivation and what that was like in each of your areas.
Sure. So on October 11th in 2016, as part of the Days of Solidarity and Prayer with Standing Rock, we shut off all the tar sands crude pipelines coming into the U.S. Tar sands is by far the most carbon-intensive form of oil, and therefore it's one of the things we need to stop pretty much immediately if we want to avoid catastrophic and irreversible climate change. So we made multiple safety calls to the company to make sure that they took whatever steps were necessary. We told them exactly where we were and exactly what we were going to do. And then we started shutting off the valves. And in most, or maybe even all cases, they eventually sort of took over that process and shut them off. But we, obviously caused the shutdown.
So it sounds like they were in the know, so what was that experience like then for them to be involved with that? You said they helped shut it down.
It was different in each case.
Okay.
So in our case with Annette and I, they started shutting down one of the two pipelines that we had. They were right next to each other almost immediately, and we could hear it, and we had been prepared to know that that might happen, and so we knew what was happening. We could also see something that looked like a large screw going down, so we could tell the valve was being shut. And at that point, we stopped, turning the actual wheel. Michael's experience was very different.
Tell us about your experience,
My
Michael.
experience was a little different because they didn't actually shut it down when they got the call. They put it into something called coast mode. And so I was turning that valve for a good half hour. But at my trial, it's very important to me, I was found not guilty of reckless endangerment. Because the Pipeline Control Center described it as an unscheduled controlled shutdown, which posed no danger to rupture or the community. I was found guilty of 2 felonies and a misdemeanor, so I face a maximum risk of about 21 years. Or community service. We just don't know. I'll find out on February 6th.
So what is, how many of you are all facing a sentence? All of you? Just Lenard?
Yeah.
So I closed the valve near Coal Banks, Montana, and my sentencing hearing is March 20th, and the maximum would be 10 years in jail and a $50,000 fine. And so I'm anxious to find out what it's going to be on March 20.
Now, I'm assuming that knowing and taking that risk and having the courage to do this, right? You were probably thinking that might be the outcome, right? That would be the result. So, for example, what was your thought process behind that, and knowing that that's a risk you were willing to take, and knowing what some of the implications might be? And we should also mention one of the positive implications is how long were these turned off for?
Between 4 and 24 hours.
4 and 24 hours. How much do you think that cost them?
Millions.
Millions of dollars.
Many millions.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually It's complicated, right?
Yeah,
It's
it is
complicated.
very
Because we didn't
complicated.
actually cost them a nickel, really,
Right.
except for like one person's attention for 20 minutes or half an hour as they checked the things before they turned them back on again. Their profits were merely postponed. But with any luck, we are still engaged in the process of a major reputational hit, which is the real goal in terms of making people understand that tar sands are a catastrophic project. And that's one thing I can say we are absolutely united on, is that was why we were willing to risk decades in prison, is that we know from the UN climate chief, among many other people, that we have at most 2.5 years to radically reduce our fossil fuel emissions, or we face irreversible catastrophic climate change. We've already seen catastrophic climate change, in Puerto Rico and elsewhere, of course.
In the Pacific Northwest, for that matter.
Absolutely, and it's only going to get radically worse, and we will lose our window of opportunity to get back to a stable climate if we don't act very, very quickly.
Right. So part of in civil disobedience and taking action, right, weighing out the consequences of not doing something. So Michael, what
That's
were you
exactly
thinking
right.
in your mind
The-
around that, and thinking I could go to jail for 20 years, or hopefully it's just community service?
Right. Well, everybody's familiar with the Keystone XL pipeline. It's been headline news for 10 years. The Keystone 1 pipeline is the pipeline that I got to shut off. And it's been in operation since 2010. And right now that oil is flowing. And 24/7, 590,000 barrels of poisonous bitumen crosses North America through this one pipeline. We can fight the Keystone XL forever. If we don't stop the existing consumption, extraction, and transport of this tar sands oil, we are cooking ourselves out of existence. So it's an emergency. It was an emergency over a year ago. And the cost of doing nothing is too great. If I end up doing time, which may or may not happen, I don't know, the thought that I didn't take action when I could have done something to keep life coming, I mean, to be the generation that makes all life to come possible, well, that's who we are. That's what we're doing here. We get to be the ones.
Right.
That's irresistible to me.
If not me, then who?
Why would I
Exactly.
not want to be part of that when I know that it's an emergency, when I
And-
know
and
that the
when-
clock has run down?
And when the alternative is that our children and grandchildren and future generations have no chance of a habitable planet if we don't do everything in our power right now to change that. That, for me, it wasn't even, quite frankly, a hard decision. I have grown children. I want them to survive. I want all of our children to survive. I want our precious, beloved planet to survive. Life on our planet. The planet will survive, but human life may very well not if we don't turn things around right now.
Can you speak to the process and helping to organize this? Were you all connected before? And so what was that, as far as even getting to the point of saying, this is where we're going to go? Like, what was the strategy behind that?
So we had discussed this tactic starting in the previous spring.
You all knew each other.
Well, we all knew each other a little, and we all knew somebody involved well. And this is by its nature was an action that we had to keep very much under wraps, and so we could only speak about it to people we really trusted. And the idea was, like, we understood, each of us understood the others to be people who understood exactly the risks of climate change. I mean, not of the action, and were willing to take the legal risk as well. We were all people who were very clear-eyed about what this moment in history means and what we have to do about it.
So, Leo, can you tell me what it was like on that day? It sounds like each of you might have had a somewhat different experience, but give us just an account of that process and what that day was like, what it felt like, what you were doing.
So we planned the action in the 4 states at 15-minute intervals. So starting in Minnesota and ending in Washington State over the course of an hour, we shut down all 5 of the pipelines.
And when you say shut down, what did you have to do to make that happen?
And so we left Fort Benton, Montana early. It was about 20 4 degrees and snowing, and drove about 45 minutes to the valve site near Coal Banks, Montana. And I was nervous. We called the pipeline companies ahead of time. We assumed that they would immediately notify law enforcement. And so we didn't know if we had 20 minutes or an hour from the time we made that call. And so my focus was on getting into the enclosure and getting the valve closed within the scheduled time for Montana.
How do you get to the valve?
And so we used bolt cutters to cut the chains that held a cyclone fence kind of enclosure closed, and went in, used bolt cutters to cut the chain on the valve. And then, like folks were saying, the mechanism was a little bit different for each pipeline. In my case, I actually started an electric motor that closed the valve.
So you'd done some research as well around each area, and
Yeah, 4 months of research and
Wow.
scouting. Yeah, a long
Scouting,
time.
a lot of
With
scouting.
a heavy emphasis on safety.
right, safety and knowing what the security was there and the
Right.
ramifications. Steve, what do you want everyone to know about in creating this film? Can you just speak to, obviously we're action oriented. I can't think of, you are walking the talk when we talk about everyday action heroes. What do you want people to get from this film? Number one, what do you want them to know about how devastating this is and the ramifications it's having on our environment and just our overall health? And second, what can we do? What are some actions we can take? And then we'll get in a moment to just support for these amazing people.
We're in the middle of a climate emergency right now, and our governments, our institutions are not responding to it. So it's upon everyday people like these valve turners to step up and take action. And I think instead of looking at the amount of money that it costs the companies, I think one of the important numbers is that they stopped 2.8 million barrels of oil, which is equal to 15% of U.S. daily consumption. And that's this small group of people that made a massive disruption in the flow of oil.
Great filmmaker who risked charges
Yes.
Right.
by getting that film made. Thank you, Steve.
True.
Yeah, so I'm facing 2 misdemeanors in Minnesota still, and I've actually had it easy because my colleagues Dea Schlossberg and Lindsey Greisel and Carl Davis, they faced felony charges. They had their camera, their footage confiscated, and spent a couple nights in jail. So they cracked down pretty hard on us. And,
Michael, can you describe what the tar sands are like? I think I know Leonardo DiCaprio in his film did a flyover, and I don't think it's something that we hear a lot about in the news, and how destructive it really is, and what they even look like. Can you describe it for everybody, and why they need to know about this?
In a word, just picture that green spot that we think of right below the tundra in the middle of Canada. And there's an area the size of Scotland where those ancient forests are called overburden because they are the thing that's in the way of the money. If they can get the overburden, those ancient forests that absorbed twice as much CO2 as the Amazon rainforest, if they can get those trees out of the way fast enough and cheaply enough, then they can start strip mining. And just under the forest floor, there's tar trapped in sand. They heat it up with cancer-causing chemicals that poison the indigenous peoples living downstream. They let off enough emissions equivalent to the size of a large North American city, and they shove it into pipelines and rail cars to ship it across North America to refineries where they can ship it all around the world so that they can provide the service to the developing world, who apparently want to be consuming as much as you and me. So we can't be like us anymore. We have to live differently. We have to stop the stuff, stop consuming it. We can turn off as many pipelines as we want to. They'll turn them right back on. That was the crime that was committed that day. A few hours after I left, oil company employees were tasked with opening that valve again, knowing that every life on Earth is at risk. because we're turning that stuff back on.
So what are our next steps now? First, I want to talk about just how we can support each of you as you're, facing your sentence and the lawsuits. So I guess that's the first question. And then second, what is important for all of us in watching this right now and the steps that we can take, both in supporting you, but also just in general in ensuring that these are closed down?
So I'll say a couple quick things about that, and I'm sure other people will have things to add. One is, in terms of supporting us, we could still use money for our legal fund, frankly.
And where do we go for that?
Shutitdown.today.
Not .com.
Not.com, exactly. Shutitdown.today. And Annette and Steve and our support guy, Ben, and I are still yet to go to trial. We're the only trial that has not happened. And we have actually been granted the necessity defense by the judge in Minnesota. That's the first written granting of the necessity defense for a climate case in the country. And the state has appealed it, but we are optimistic, or at least hopeful that it will still happen, probably this summer sometime. And in terms of what we want people to sort of come away from this with, the main thing is that a lot of very smart people understand climate change and believe in climate change, but really have no idea how urgent it is. The fact that we only have a couple years to radically begin reducing our emissions, most people are just, thinking that like shorter showers and driving, one day a week less or something.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's not
Yeah.
gonna do it.
We
Right.
need to change the system, and partly what we need to do also, the U.S. is actually like the worst actor right now on climate change per person by a long shot, and we have been throwing that stuff into the atmosphere for much longer than anybody else. And so until like 2035, the vast majority of the carbon molecules in the atmosphere are ours. So in other words, when other countries begin to get more developed, that is not an excuse for us to continue emitting. In fact, we have to, those are the countries that are suffering first from climate change in the global south. We have to help them leapfrog, and we also have to, think about reparations and
absolutely.
supporting their countries as they do. Of course, they want to develop, but none of us can be using fossil fuel anymore in the way that we're doing. So what we have to do is we have to change our system, and we have to change it really fast so that people have options. So people who live in places, right now where they have to get around by car, that's not their only option, and so that when people turn on the light, it's not being coal-fired or gas-fired or, fracked gas or whatever. We have to be increasing our investment in renewables massively and changing our political system so that everybody has options that save
At
the
the
planet.
same time that we're not overusing.
Right, the overconsumption, right,
Right.
absolutely.
And Annette, how is this just, and moving forward now, how is this, real quickly for all of you, just had a significant impact and change in who you are and how you show up right now as a result of that one action in that moment?
How we show
I-
up differently.
Yeah, I would say actually, I've been like 100% devoted to this for like,
years.
for like 5 years now. So I guess I wouldn't say it changed that much, except that, people think I'm cooler now, which is really kind of silly because I've been doing this stuff around the clock, regardless. So anyway.
And
Yeah, I would add that, we've all been doing this for some time, and part of what the necessity defense is, well, did you exhaust all of our other remedies? We did. We all have worked on this in every conceivable way possible, and we know that none of the other ways work. The only thing that works at this point is putting your body on the line and making them stop. And we need a lot more people to step up and do that, because we do not have a political system that is responsive to ordinary human beings. It is absolutely controlled by corporations, particularly fossil fuel corporations. And, the only way we get their attention is to hurt their profits.
Hurt the profits with the money, the
Yeah.
financial aspects.
Yeah.
Taking radical action. I think you are the ultimate examples of that, and I so appreciate your being here and for everything that you're doing to make a difference. I think it's really important for all of us to both see and witness that and hear your stories, to know that as just everyday people, there's a lot more power that you have than you might think you have, and and you're capable
Yes.
of a lot more than you actually might think as well. And of course, being one person is extraordinary in what what you can do, but also as our theme is groundswell here at Wild and Scenic, groundswell is really around that convergence and coming together. So here are some individuals, even despite living in different locations, who came together and said enough's enough, we're going to do something about this. You had that support of each other to do that. Imagine what that would look like if it was hundreds, thousands, if not millions of more. So it all starts somewhere, and obviously started right here, and things happen. Wild and Scenic. So thank you so much. And please let us know how we can continue to support you. And I'm sure there will be other actions that you'll be taking that we will be hearing about, and hopefully have more, more groundswell around that as well. And thank you, Steve, for making the film. It's Valve Turners. And when is it screening?
Yeah, it's going to be this evening, 7 o'clock in Grass Valley at Oddfellows.
Great. I'm Elisa Parker. It is the Wild and Scenic Film Festival. I mean, I don't even know what else to say about it. It's just an amazing opportunity to be here and connect with all these amazing people and the storytellers. So continue to tell the stories and continue to take action. We'll be right back.